Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for a daily dose of Commander 2017 spoilers. So Commander 2017 preview season is officially here. All this week, we're going to get to see new cards from the 4 Commander decks coming out at the end of the month, and today is apparently Cat Day. Every card that has been previewed so far is from the Cat deck, so we have a ton of sweet new cats and cat-related cards, along with a couple of other things that happen to be in the deck that we get to talk about today. So a real quick reminder before we jump into Commander 2017 daily spoilers. The cards from Commander 17 are only legal in Commander and older formats, in Legacy and Vintage, so keep that in mind. These cards aren't legal in Standard, they're not legal in Modern, so if we don't talk a lot about Standard and Modern in this video, you'll know why, because you can't actually play these cards in those formats. So instead, we're going to focus on Commander, and in some cases, older formats as well. Anyway, we got a lot of ground to cover with 56 new cards coming out this week. That means there's a ton to talk about, so let's jump into it. Card number 1, we have Miri, Weatherlight Duelist, a new cat legendary mythic, and this card is pretty sweet. So for only 3 mana, you get a 3/2 with first strike, which is fine. Whenever it attacks, each opponent can only block with a single creature, so it helps you get in a bunch of combat damage. And then, if Miri is tapped, your opponents can only attack you with 1 creature. So in some ways, this is like an upgraded cat-centric version of Silent Arbiter. The big deal is, Miri only affects your opponents. Silent Arbiter affects everyone, makes it so you can only block with 1 creature, you can only attack with 1 creature. Miri just does that to your opponents, so I think the trick with Miri is being able to take advantage of the second ability. If you're playing a really aggressive deck, the first ability is pretty good too. Making your opponent only block with 1 creature means you can get in a ton of damage. The problem is, if you just swing out with your team at your opponent, a lot of times you're going to die on the backswing, which is why having a tapped Miri is really essential, because it means you can swing out with impunity at your opponent, deal a ton of damage, and hopefully not die, because your opponents can only attack you with a single creature. So I think my favorite card to play with Miri is Godsend. Godsend is such a sweet combo, because with Miri, the easiest way to just get her tapped is to attack, and then it's tapped naturally, keeps our opponent from swinging back. Godsend is the perfect card for this situation, because not only does it pump Miri to a 6/5 first strike, which is already pretty big, but if our opponent blocks, since they can only block with 1 creature, that creature automatically gets exiled. They can't just block with a whole bunch of creatures to kill Miri, so our opponent, if they do block, their creature is exiled, Miri's tapped, they can't attack us back with more than 1 creature. If they don't block, that's fine too, we get in 6 damage, and our opponent can't attack us back with much. The other option is stuff like Whisper Silk Cloak. You can just make Miri unblockable and get in damage that way. So I think that this card, it's powerful. It's nice that it isn't too cat-centric. You can just play a green-white aggro deck where you want to do a lot of attacking. Miri works well there, but it's probably most likely going to find homes in 99s, where you can tutor it up with Captain Sisay, just play it in a green-white beatdown deck, and be able to use it that way. As a commander, it's a little bit limited in what it actually does, but I think it's a really sweet new card. Our next card is Nazan, Revered Bladesmith, which is basically Catforge Mystic. Yes, it costs 1,000,000 mana, but when it enters the battlefield, you get to tutor for an equipment and reveal it. If it's Hammer of Nazan, it goes right on the battlefield, otherwise it goes to your hand, and then if you attack with an equipped creature, you get to tap a creature defending player control. So this, I believe, is going to be a really strong card. Stoneforge Mythic is really good. Equipments are a really powerful and popular card type in Commander, so I can see a lot of uses for Nazan, either as a commander or in 99. As far as the equipment, Hammer of Nazan, it's interesting. So it's 4 mana, it only gives a creature +2/+0, but it does have indestructible. The big deal here is it makes it so whenever it or another equipment enters the battlefield, you get to equip it for free. So we've seen this effect before. We've had cards that let you equip for free, but we haven't really seen that on an equipment, so it's really powerful that we can tutor up Hammer of Nazan with Nazan, have the Hammer of Nazan on the battlefield, equipped to Nazan most likely, making it indestructible because it goes right on the battlefield, it equips, and then every other equipment we play is just automatically equipping and Voltroning up our Nazan, or whatever we want. It doesn't have to go on Nazan. I think the thing I like most about Nazan is it really opens up the equipment archetype. So, as I mentioned before, equipments are popular card types, and building equipment matters or equipment tribal decks are a thing in Commander. Collector. And I think Nazan opens a ton of space there. If you look at the previous best commanders for a equipment deck, you have stuff like Kemba Ka Regent, Strom Senior Edificer, Raska Golden Cub. These are all really good cards. The problem is they're mono white, which really limits you. White is one of the worst colors, arguably the worst color in Commander if you're going to be a mono color deck, but adding in green gives you more card draw. It gives you some ramp. It gives you stuff that you don't have access to in white. So I think that Nazan is going to be super popular for anyone who wants to build an equipment theme deck. It's also the #1 way to set up the Caldra combo. So if you watch Commander Clash, you probably saw Tomer trying and trying and trying for episodes and episodes to assemble Caldra, and Nazan is the perfect card for it. You play it, you get to tutor up a Caldra equipment. When it dies, you play it again, tutor up another one. One more time, you have all 3 Caldra pieces. You have achieved the goal of assembling Caldra. So that was the first thing I thought of when I saw Nazan, is this is a card that Tomer is going to love because it helps him set up the Caldra combo. Next up, we have our final new legend. So the last new commander that we got today, and that's Balan Wandering Knight. And Balan is probably the least exciting of the cat legends. 4 mana, 3/3 first strike, fine. If it's equipped with 2 or more equipments, it gets double strike. And then you can pay 1 and a white to attach all equipments to it. So it is powerful in an equipment deck, but it's basically only good at one thing, and that is Voltroning up and going to town at your opponent's life total. So if you want to build an all-in, beat your opponent down with your commander, backed by equipment, Balan's probably a good choice there. It kind of reminds me of Volshuk Battlemaster, the ability to equip all equipments to it, but this is even better because it's not an enter the battlefield trigger, and you can do it whenever you want to do it. So I think if you want to play a bunch of swords and Swiftfoot Boots and maybe a cranial plating and try to get like a 21 power Balan, make it unblockable, and just swing in and kill your opponent in one shot, Balan's a very good option for that. It's a great equipment Voltron commander, but it's very narrow. I don't see many uses outside of that. Sure, you can just play it in a normal aggressive deck with a small equipment package, but that's the main use of Balan as a commander, so I think it's the least exciting of the bunch. But if you were interested in Voltron equipment, Balan is definitely near the top of the list of commanders to consider for that role. Moving into the non-commander card, Collector might be the most powerful card previewed today. 4 mana, you get a 3/4 with flash, and it has an ability where if an opponent would draw 2 or more cards, instead you and that player each draw 1 card. So this is basically the white version of Notion Thief. It does a lot of the same things. So Notion Thief comes down, you play a wheel or something, your opponent loses their hand. Collector does basically the same thing. If you can make your opponent draw a bunch of cards with Collector out, especially with a wheel effect, with a windfall, with a Wheel of Fortune, where each player is discarding their hand, you're going to put your opponent down to 1 card in hand, while you're also going to draw extra cards. You cast Wheel of Fortune, you draw 7 naturally, then you're also going to draw an extra card for each of your opponents, so you're going to draw 10, while your opponents are going to go down to 1 card in hand. Sure, they're not empty-handed like with Notion Thief, but 1 card is still not very many to win the game. So there's a really exciting possibility for Collector to work like another copy of Notion Thief in those type of unfair decks. The problem with Collector in Commander is you usually want to be in blue and red and even black if you're going to play a wheel type deck where you're trying to cast these Wheel of Fortunes, empty your opponent's hand. That's where the wheels are. That's where a lot of the Howling Mines are in blue. So it's in a weird color to really be in a wheel deck. However, there are some equipments that might let us play a really janky mono-white Howling Mine deck. If you look at Fauna Mythos, Otherworld Atlas, Teferi's Puzzle Box, these are cards. Let's take Fauna Mythos, for example. You get it on the battlefield along with the Collector. You're going to draw 4 cards each turn cycle. 5 cards, actually, because you get 2 on your turn from Fauna Mythos. So your opponent goes to draw a card. Normally, they draw 2 cards with Fauna Mythos. They draw 1, you draw 1. The next opponent does the same thing. So you have this huge influx of card advantage, and your opponent's getting a little advantage, but not that much of an advantage. So I think there's some cool, janky things where you can build around Collector. Although, like I said, I'm a little worried that it doesn't fall into the typical wheel colors. You can also just use it to annoy your opponent. opponents as part of a stack or something like that if you want to just be a little bit mean and make it annoying for your opponent to play Magic. Next up, we have Stalking Leonin, which is the card that I think might be most likely, well, besides Alms Collector, which does have an outside shot to see playing Legacy. Notion Thief sees Fringe playing Legacy. It could slot in there. But Stalking Leonin is another card that might have a bit of Legacy potential. So 3 mana 3/3, not super exciting. When it enters the battlefield, you secretly choose an opponent, which I think means you're going to write down the opponent's name. In a 2-player game, obviously, you only got one opponent, so you know who it is. And then you can reveal the chosen player. So flip up the paper where you wrote down the name, for example, and you can exile an attacking creature if it's controlled by the chosen player, but you can only activate it once. So I was a little surprised that this didn't sacrifice itself or exile itself to kill the attacking creature. So in a multiplayer game, it's this weird political card. Obviously, you can bounce it and reset it and blink it and reset it and so forth. But in a 1v1 game, your opponent knows it's coming, but I think it could work in Legacy Death and Taxes, where you have Ether Vial to put it into play, and then after you kill something, you can always Flicker Wisp it to reset it, to do it again, and you can even do that all in the same combat. You can exile one creature, Flicker Wisp, exile another creature, get rid of your opponent's Delvers or something like that. The big problem is there's a lot of competition in the 3-drop slot in Death and Taxes, so we'll see if Stalking Leonin can actually fight into that spot. But it's a very powerful removal option, and is going to see a lot of play in Commander, in Brago decks. Anything that's blinking and resetting its creatures makes Stalking Leonin really good. Our next card is Traverse the Outlands, which has to be one of the more powerful ramp spells printed in a long time. It's kind of reminiscent of Boundless Realms, of Hour of Promise. 5 mana, you search your library for X basic lands where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put them into play tapped. So this has some crazy potential. If you think about the cards, we're sticking with green-white since we're in the green-white deck, but Ronas the Indomitable, Pelukrinos the World Eater, you got a lot of 5-powered creatures that are already good and will already be on the battlefield before Traverse the Outlands, so you can very easily make this a ramp 5 for 5 mana, going from 5 mana up to 10 or 11 mana the next turn, which is insane. If you think about Explosive Vegetation, it's 4 mana, get 2 lands. Hour of Promise, 5 mana, get 2 lands. All those cards only get 2 lands. It's going to be pretty easy if you're playing a creature-heavy build to make Traverse the Uvenwald be ramp for at minimum, worst case, 3 lands, often 4 lands, in best case, up to 5 lands, and that's on turn 5. In the late game, you could have an Ulamog out and just ramp for a nearly infinite number of lands. Pull all the lands out of your deck. How much more mana could you ever want? So I think Traverse the Outlands is a super strong ramp spell, and is pretty much going to just slot into any rampy, big, green creature deck in Commander. I can't see a good argument for most decks. If you're not playing creatures, it's different. But if you're just playing a creature deck, I can't see an argument for not playing this over something like Explosive Vegetation. I think the upside, the insane potential of Traverse, makes it better than the more consistent but much less powerful Explosive Vegetation. So an easy card to swap in there. We also got Hungry Lynx, which is a weird card. I love the flavor of this card, probably the most flavorful card spoiled today. 2 mana 2/2. Your cats have protection from rats. Beginning your end step, you give your opponent of your choice a 1/1 rat with Death Touch, and when a rat dies, it pumps your cats. They eat it, they get full, they get stronger. The flavor is so good. I'm a little worried about how this card will actually play. Death Touch is powerful. We see cards that see play. Hapatra makes Death Touch snakes. They're really annoying because they take down titans and huge creatures, even though they're just 1/1s. So giving your opponent 1/1 Death Touch rats is a little bit sketchy, especially since they're coming from Hungry Lynx, which is only a 2/2, and if your opponent kills it, they're still going to have the rats. So there's a little bit of problems there as far as making Hungry Lynx really work. But as far as flavor, Hungry Lynx is off the chart. It's one of the most flavorful Magic cards ever printed, and I really love it, even if it doesn't turn out to be great. But this is definitely one of the cards that is a cat tribal card. That's the only place I would consider playing this. If you can give your entire team protection from the rats and grow them a few times, it's a great deal. Otherwise, I don't know. I can't imagine just slotting this into a normal deck. We also got some equipment. That's kind of the sub-theme of the cat deck. Bloodforge Battle Axe is an unofficial translation from a German card, I believe, but this card is super sweet. It's basically a bone splitter. It costs 1 more to equip, gives a creature +0/+2. You're probably wondering, why is Bone Splinter a rare? Well, whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage, you get another Bone Splinter. So eventually things just spiral out of control and you have this huge board full of Bone Splinters where you're getting more and more Bone Splitters. And there's some commanders and creatures in Commander that really love it. The first one that came to mind is Kemba Cow Regent. The more equipments you have on Kemba, the more cat tokens you make, and then the more cats you have to deal damage with and get more equipments with Bloodforged Battle Axe. So I think it's a great slot in there. Also, Armament Master does some sweet things. If you're going to play a core tribal deck, you can make your team really huge with Bloodforged Battle Axe. So I think there's some sweet options as far as that goes. You can also just play it to kind of make a bunch of Bone Splitters and put them on a hexproof creature or something. So a really neat take on equipment and a cool callback to Bone Splitter. We also have Arbo, Roar of the World. We knew this one from before. This is the face card. It leaked out a little while ago. 5-mana 5/5, giant grows your cats from the command zone and pumps your cats even more from the battlefield. A really powerful card, but only if you're in a cat deck. We're not going to spend too long talking about it because it's not brand new, but it's worth mentioning it here for the sake of completion. And then a couple of reprints that snuck out. Set's Tiger is a cat. I don't know if it's a super powerful cat, but it's a fine, rare reprint. A hill giant can gain protection from a color, has flash, and then Command Tower, which is always a nice reprint. One of the most played cards in Commander. It actually might be the single most played card in Commander, but it's definitely in the top 5. Having them be as cheap as possible so you can have a copy in every deck without breaking the bank is a great thing. And that's our daily Commander spoilers for today. So what do you think? What cats are you most excited about? What commander from today are you most excited to build around? Do you like the cat deck? I know for me personally, I do like it, and I think there's some really cool standalone cards, but I'm really excited for some of the future decks. It doesn't fit my playstyle as well as I'm hoping some of the other decks, like Wizards or Dragons do, because I kind of want to dirtle, I kind of want to draw cards, and while there's some cool stuff in the cat deck, it seems like it's more aggressive. If you like attacking, if you like playing equipments and making huge Voltron commanders and stuff like that, I think the cat deck is the perfect deck for you. But if you're a dirtler and want to just kind of sit back and do nothing the whole game, probably better to look at some of the other options that we'll see later in the week. So anyway, that does it for our daily dose of Commander 2017 spoilers. Like I said, make sure to let me know in the comments what you think about all the cards we got to see today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.